Welcome to the Outlaw Radio Show. We are sorry that we're experiencing some technical difficulties. We've shut everything down, rebooted it, and we're still having a bit of a glitch. It's not the internet. The internet's fine. It seems to be something not on our end, but on our video hosting site that actually sends the feeds out to Facebook and YouTube, meaning that I'm not sure that there's a whole lot we're going to be able to do to get this fixed tonight. That being said, we still have to record a radio show. And so we are going to just live stream the recording of the show like we always do. Hopefully, this lag that you might be experiencing will clear itself out. Hopefully, the cobwebs will get cleared, and this will be all right. If not, we apologize. We're sorry. I am still joined by Creighton, who is frantically trying to figure out what's going on. I appreciate that, Creighton. You're doing a good job. This seems to be out of our hands. And joined by Nick and Derek, who are frantically doing nothing. Yeah, they did a really good job getting on to Creighton about things. So we're just gonna, at this point, we've got a radio show to do, and Creighton, the first block here, has a lot to do with you. Like you kind of play a big role here. And
yeah, it's a really good way to start the day.
And so, regardless, the audio will be clean, and we'll be fine, and we'll be able to just kind of go from there. So, one of the new things that we are going to be doing, because we're at that part of the year where we're using the air conditioning, there is a hum that gets picked up, and so our producer needs us to provide at the beginning of each block just a few seconds of clean audio. And so I'm going to go ahead and kind of drop the music. Nick's going to count me down 10 seconds, and then we're going to record a radio show. You guys ready? We ready for this?
I don't think we're streaming to YouTube at all, and I don't know why.
And you don't know why.
But other than that, yeah.
Just go with it.
Is it because, did I delete the file that was there, that was needed?
I honestly don't know.
You just don't know.
Vimeo handles streaming to YouTube, so when it doesn't work, I don't have a lot of recourse in terms of troubleshooting because Vimeo handles it.
Right. Well, I mean, at this point, if this gets out on YouTube at all, what's nice is we are recording the video, and so I can give you the files if you want to edit the video and post it.
Yeah, I think that'd be a good idea.
In the next few days, I mean, we can release this in a recorded version, and let it roll. If you want to try to, what are you looking at?
Oh, Pastor Bob said, for the third time, Pastor Bob here. How was the Masters?
The Masters was fantastic. But Bob, are you getting a clear signal? I mean, that's what we're trying to find out. I'll talk to Bob about the Masters in one of the blocks. I'm gonna hit some music and let's do this because we're just killing time here. Here we go. 3, 2, 1. Welcome to the Outlaw Radio Show. My name is Zach Adams, and I pastor a church located just outside of Athens, Georgia. The name of the church is Calvary 316. If you happen to be local and you live near Highway 316, if you live in the Bethlehem, Winder, Auburn, Monroe area outside of Athens, please come be our guest one Sunday morning. Our service begins promptly at 10:30. If you aren't local but maybe looking for a good church you can watch online, a church that teaches God's word faithfully, you can watch our live stream on YouTube, Calvary316.live, or on Facebook, facebook.com/Calvary316. Again, the service is at 10:30. If you're local, be our guest. If you're not, watch us online, join us digitally. To learn more about the church, you can visit Calvary316.tv. If you want to access our teaching media, check out C316.tv. And again, you can watch on Sunday, 10:30, Calvary316.live. Wherever you're listening, or however you're listening, whether you're listening on one of our wonderful radio partners, this is a nationally syndicated radio show, or you're listening to our podcast, every episode of the Outlaw Radio Show is podcasted in its entirety. Our podcast is really available wherever podcasts are found. Apple Podcasting, Google Play, Spotify. We're really on all the various platforms. Regardless, though, I do hope that you stay with me over the next hour as we seek to deconstruct the negative perception the world has of Christians by boldly discussing relevant topics in an honest and genuine way. One caveat, you're not going to agree with everything you hear on the Outlaw Radio Show, and that's a good thing. Christians sometimes get the bad rap of being very monolithic in the way that we think, group thought. Christians should be free to think for themselves, to process the world around them from a biblical angle, but relevant to your own particular needs and environment and some of the particulars, like the way that I view the world today, having children, is much different than the way I viewed the world when I didn't have any children. A lot of experience, life changes the way that you see things. Again, the truth of God's word should anchor us always. It should give us the baseline. Again, we are equipped with the truth. The way that we apply, though, and try to take the principles of Scripture and navigate this world can vary from person to person. And so if you hear something and you totally disagree with it, that's cool. That's fine. You can start your own podcast, no big deal, and let other people disagree with you. But at the same time, we do really champion and encourage a diversity of thought and opinion. And as a result, we'd love to hear from you, the listening audience. Our website is outlawradio.org, and from there you can find all of our contact information. Our email is info@outlawradio.org. We have a Facebook page, Twitter. You can find out all of that information. I am joined today, as always, by Creighton Vaughn. Creighton, welcome to the Outlaw Radio Show.
Hello, Zach. Thanks for having me.
And because of the subject matter of today, I think it would be a little helpful. I'm going to kind of set the stage of what we're going to talk about, why I went to you to talk about this, to do some research on it. And so it's going to be helpful after I set the stage for you to provide a little bit of kind of your background and interest and why you kind of geek out when it comes to these type of matters. The subject, so we're all in this space where we're trying to navigate, we're trying to figure out about this vaccine. And I don't judge anyone either way. If you have already gotten vaccinated, man, that's great for you. Like, knock yourself out. If you have one shot, you're waiting for the second shot, that's wonderful. Like, no judgment. I am not in any way an anti-vaxxer. All of my children have been vaccinated with all of the things their pediatricians have recommended they be vaccinated for. I have all of my vaccinations growing up, same with my wife. So I've never really believed in the anti-vaxxing movement. I think it can be silly. It can cause undue risk. I do know that there is some science and some debates about, side effects. There are side effects with everything. There are side effects with living. There's side effects with vaccines, and that's going to come with the territory. So when it comes to the COVID vaccine, it's exciting because at least we all believe that it will allow our world to get back to normal, that the more people get vaccinated, the greater immunity, communal immunity that will develop, herd immunity, which will then limit the spread of this virus within our society. And I think that's something that we all look forward to, because when that happens, then we can get back to life as normal a bit more than it already is. And so I am not against the vaccine, and I've got to reiterate that because I don't want to be accused of it. I have not gotten the vaccine. I do think, though, that we are like treading on some really we're treading on territory we need to be careful about treading on. I would encourage anyone. The only reason I mentioned that I haven't gotten the vaccine is just for full disclosure. But if someone comes to you, an employer, a boss, and they ask you if you've gotten the vaccine, you have every right to say that's none of your business. Again, medical decisions are something that should be reserved to the patient and their physician, and that should be private. We have HIPAA laws in America that should protect people from disclosing things about their medical person that don't need to be disclosed. And so I think universally we should all get to the point of saying, when asked, have you taken the vaccine, of being like, well, you know what, that's really none of your business, whether I have or I haven't. It's a shame. I think it's sad that we have a political environment where taking the vaccine is being framed by some of our political leaders like President Biden as the patriotic thing to do. I saw a report that 40% of Marines have refused to take the vaccination, meaning that their commander-in-chief has said that they're not patriotic. I thought the liberals were pretty big on not defining what type of activities were or weren't patriotic, in the sense of, like, you remember, conservatives got all bent out of shape about people refusing to stand for the national anthem. Be like, well, that's the unpatriotic thing to do. And what was the liberal response? The liberal response was like, you can't tell me what kind of an expression is or isn't patriotic. And it's like, yeah, okay, that's fine. You want to sit down and that's your patriotic response? Whatever. But now we're in a whole new world where it's like, if you don't take the vaccine, somehow you're not American, or you're not moral, or you're, again, now wanting to kill grandma. It's the same playbook about wearing masks and not social distancing, etc. It gets tiring. It gets laborious. So I wish we would tone down some of the rhetoric. We'd allow people to make the decision at their own discretion, with their own research and consultation with their own physicians. Although I have got to say this, I have heard, that line, like, you need to consult your physician about whether or not you need to take the vaccine. And the people that say that are so out of touch with the majority of middle America, because we don't have physicians. Like, I don't have a personal physician. I hadn't been to the doctor in years. I can't afford to go. Most of the people I know are in the same position. Like, unless they're provided health care through their employer, they don't have it, or they have a version of it where you just don't go. So when someone's like, you just need to reach out to your local physician and get their opinion on it, it's like, who are you talking to? Like, I don't. My wife and I were talking about, like, who would we even call? Like, I had no idea. My local practitioner, like, it's crazy. But again, I think these decisions, the vaccine, these things should be reserved to the individual. We need to pump the brakes on this kind of societal peer pressure. I saw one of the talking heads on CNN trying to get this. They were calling out Fox News for not posting, their correspondents not posting their COVID selfies. Everyone on their network was getting pictures of them getting the vaccine and then tweeting it out, these selfies, to try to, encourage everyone else to do it. And it's like, let people make their own decisions. Man, when the government in cahoots with the media starts pushing something and Republicans and Democrats seem unified on it, I get very skeptical right there. So I just think it would be smart just to let people make their own decisions. Now, regarding this vaccine and the development of it, again, in record time, I am not a scientist, full disclosure. Not only that, but I really did not like biology class or chemistry class. I really had no interest in science. And so when it comes to, a vaccine and trying to do research into the efficacies of it and how it was developed and is it safe or does it affect fertility or, good grief, if you're in an at-risk category, 75 and older with 4 comorbidities, yeah, go get the vaccine. Even the high risk of some type of negative counteraction or medical result from it, cost-benefit analysis, you should probably do it. But where I'm sitting, 38, a wife potentially maybe wanting to have another child, like we are kind of trying to figure things out. So that's why I went to my partner in crime, Creighton Vaughn, because Creighton loves science. I don't. Creighton understands science. I don't. And so I had been reading a few articles, wanted to talk a little bit more about the vaccine here on the Outlaw Radio Show. And so I sent some stuff that I had been reading to Creighton and said, hey, man, you like this stuff. I don't. Can you read through this, develop some thoughts, give me some feedback, and then I want that feedback on the air so that our listening audience can absorb that as well. So, Creighton, we've got roughly 3 minutes left in this first block. And so without even getting into the data or getting into the research, can you kind of just explain to the audience a bit of your background and why this is a topic that you kind of jumped at the opportunity to dive into?
Absolutely. So basically, I've loved biology my entire life. It's the only class in high school that I enjoyed enough to take. I took both biology freshman year and AP Bio junior year.
See, I didn't even know there was another biology class beyond the one you had to take.
Yeah, it's essentially the same class, but you get a little deeper on a little more topics. And so it's for the smart kids who want to get college credits. I went to college. I was there for a year. I was a biology major.
So you, before Jesus put a call in your life to go into ministry, your pursuit, what really interested you, where you would have gone was...
I wanted to be a doctor. I wanted to be a forensic pathologist, which means I wanted to be a doctor for dead people. But
which has a high success rate, by the way.
Dude, no malpractice suits.
I mean, no malpractice suits when you're a doctor for dead people.
Yeah. I liked it enough that I worked in a mosquito lab when I was in college.
I remember that.
Counted mosquitoes for 8 hours a day, and I loved it.
I'm going to say that sounds absolutely horrifying and terrible. Like,
it
first,
was awesome.
Working on dead bodies, it sounds morbid, because it is.
Yeah.
And counting mosquitoes, that sounds like a job for an intern. But you love biology, and you kind of follow it a bit as a hobby, right?
Yes, I keep an eye on the kind of things that come up, things like CRISPR, which we'll talk about, that kind of stuff.
And so you have an interest in biology, kind of. It's a bit of a hobby. It's what you would have done. You would have gone into these kind of fields if it wasn't for Jesus' call on your life. And so kind of tease the audience with the 45 seconds we have on what we're going to discuss when we come back from the break.
Basically, we're going to talk about how a cell works and how it replicates and how it creates things.
Now, when you came in to the studio and I was like, hey, what are we talking about today? Because I had no idea where you would land on any of this. I mean, you were genuinely kind of geeked up because this is some pretty cool science.
It really is. They did amazing things.
Really, for the first time. I mean, this was groundbreaking in how they developed this vaccine.
I mean, if it keeps going, it could be paradigm shifting, to use a nice sci-fi word.
Well, when we come back, we're going to talk about the vaccine, what it really is. So don't go anywhere. You're listening to the Outlaw Radio Show.
Okay, it still looks bad. I've been told the audio is still choppy. Pastor Bob says that it is getting better.
Okay.
But this is still kind of it's a rough stream.
Well, this is a mess, but we've got to record a radio show regardless. So that's what we're gonna do, and if it clears up, it clears up. If it don't, it don't.
Power through.
We will power through either way. So what is nice is that you can take the SD cards with you because we won't need them for Sunday.
Oh, that's right.
And so you will have several days to work on an edit. Which will be great. So let's go ahead and jump back in. Let's continue this thought. You guys have anything to add?
Ready for Creighton to get nerdy.
Let's let Creighton get nerdy. All right, Nick, you're gonna count me.
You want to do the same thing?
We got to do it each time.
Oh, each time? Okay.
12 minutes, Gray. 3, 2, 1. Welcome back to the Outlaw Radio Show. I'm joined by my partner in crime, Creighton Vaughn.
Hello, everybody. I thought you were going to keep speaking.
I was, and then I decided not to. So at this point, I want to kind of throw it to you. We've got a whole show we can talk about. We've got a lot of other things we can discuss, but talk about how they, I guess let's set it up this way. What is the vaccine? Like, what does the vaccine do? And then let's talk about how it was made. And then we'll be able to talk about potential side effects and things people have to think through. So the first question is what does the vaccine do? And I say that, is it actually a vaccine in the traditional sense? Because I've heard that.
Right. So in the traditional sense, it is not at all a vaccine, because vaccines are essentially where you introduce a either inoperable or broken piece of a pathogen, whether it be a virus or a bacteria or something that's going to try and harm you. You introduce a part of it into the body, usually through an injection, bloodstream, and allow your immune system to react to it. Because when it does, it will create antibodies, learn how to fight that. And then if you come in contact with the real thing, your body's like, oh, I know how to deal with this, and just goes to town, and you don't get the same strain of flu or cold that you had last year.
And that's the way it works with like the measles and the chicken pox, smallpox, like those type of like the big vaccines that you get.
Yeah, basically all vaccines work that way. It's also why you generally only get viruses once, except for viruses that mutate really quickly, like the cold and the flu.
So a normal vaccine, they take a part of the virus that's not going to affect you, and they do that to get your body to go ahead and create antibodies so that when you encounter the real thing in the world, you already have the immunity to resist it.
Right. Your T cells can just immediately see it and attack it, as opposed to your body having to have that identification response first.
So when we talk about, and again, I'm going to kind of act as the audience here a little bit, the non-science nerds. You know, we hear a lot about antibodies, T cells. Explain what they do. Like, why are they important?
So basically, your greater immune system, and this is way more complicated than I'm going to make it, but basically, your body has three types of immune cells. Well, two types of immune cells. You have B cells and T cells. B cells are white blood cells that encounter pathogens and make antibodies.
Those are the better cells. That's why they call them B.
Yeah, sure. No, but antibodies are just little cell fragments that attach to pathogens. So
and when you say pathogens, that's a fancy word of saying the disease.
anything that's not supposed to be there,
Okay.
whether it be pollen, virus, bacteria, or a piece of iron.
So what are T cells then?
So T cells are also called macrophages. They're giant white blood cells that look for antibodies that are attached to something, and whatever they're attached to, the T cell eats and breaks down.
So the T cell works with the antibody. The antibody is kind of like it jumps on the enemy ship, sending out a signal to the T cell, come
and
eat
the
me.
T cell just rockets at it.
And it eats it, consumes it, kills it, basically.
Exactly.
And so antibodies are the flares that the T cells are looking for.
Yes.
And again,
that's
this
basically
we're
exactly how
we're
it
doing
works.
biology for dummies here with Creighton Vaughn. Creighton is getting Zach Adams to understand how this works. So in a normal vaccine, you introduce to the body a pathogen, the disease, so that antibodies attach to the disease. The T cell eats it. More antibodies are created from that, and it just builds this immunity for it.
Essentially, it's you introduce the disease, the B cell sees it and starts creating antibodies.
Okay.
And B cells are just constantly pumping out antibodies for everything they've ever seen.
Gotcha. Okay.
So then the
Well, that's
antibodies
good.
are flowing through your body, your bloodstream constantly.
They are the boss cells.
Yes.
All right.
And whenever they see something that matches what they were made for, they attach to it and T cells immediately attack that thing. Whatever
Yeah.
it is.
God is awesome that he created that.
And that is so much more complicated when you actually start looking into the microbiology. It's insane.
Okay. So that's how a normal vaccine provides what we would call immunity.
Yes.
But that is not what this quote unquote vaccine does.
No.
So explain what this does in the context of what a virus like the normal vaccine would do.
Okay. So essentially what the vaccine does is it skips the identification phase.
Which is what the B cells do.
Right.
Okay.
So what it does is it basically passes a packet of information called mRNA into the B cell.
Okay, say that again.
mRNA.
Okay, so
it's
those are
messenger,
letters. Okay.
Ribonucleic acid.
Okay. The other voice that you just heard was Derek, who's one of our audience members.
Yes. So it's messenger ribonucleic acid. It is a smaller form of DNA. Very similar molecules.
Okay,
Which
so
we'll get to why that is in a second.
okay, so continue.
So it passes this packet of information in. The B cell sees that, passes that to one of its organelles, and starts pumping out antibodies. Well, technically, it starts pumping out a thing called a spike protein, which other B cells see, which then makes the antibodies.
We don't have to overcomplicate it. That's what
But
we're
yeah,
going to avoid
So
here.
it passes in this information, which starts the creation of antibodies. And then now your T cells will know what to attack without your body ever actually coming in contact with the thing that it's attacking.
So instead of like a normal vaccine giving your body a little bit of the disease so that the B cells react and create antibodies, scientists are doing this mRNA where what are they making? Because this is like, they're not giving you the coronavirus to create antibodies. They're giving you this thing that's that's tricking the B cells into thinking it's something that it's not, to create antibodies for COVID.
Right. So to kind of understand that, you have to understand how DNA works. Essentially,
God writes it.
well, yes.
Okay.
Because it is in a possibly long string of information that sits inside your nucleus. And when your cell needs to make something, it sends in something called tRNA, which goes through a whole transcription thing and takes a bunch of your DNA, like a section of it, reads it, transcripts it into mRNA, which is then shipped out of your nucleus to a organelle called a ribosome, which reads it and creates a protein, like an antibody.
So scientists have basically created a fake COVID using DNA. Like they've basically written, like when you get the shot, like what's the fluid that they're putting in you?
It is the chunk of DNA that the cell needs to make the antibody to fight COVID.
So we've
it's
been
like
able.
you could reach in, like if you had COVID and I didn't, I could reach into your body and pull out the part of your cell's DNA that knows how to make the antibodies.
Very cool.
And put it into my body.
That's very cool. And that's basically what all of them have done. Because, I mean, we've got a lot of different, is this the Moderna, the Pfizer, Johnson and Johnson?
I'm not entirely sure. I'm pretty sure they all work in this mRNA transcriptase form, but I'm not 100% on that.
Okay. But generally speaking, this is how they've done it.
Yes.
So once I get this and this mRNA is in my body, the B cells are reacting as if I had COVID, producing what I need, which is the antibodies, so that when I do get COVID, they'll attach to it because they've already, like, they're good, and T cells are eating stuff.
Yes.
Which then explains why people are still getting COVID, even with the vaccine.
Yes. It's the same way you can still get the flu after getting the flu shot.
It just
works the same.
It just lessens the effect of the disease because you're already way ahead of the game on what your body needs to fight it. That's a very simplified view of it.
Yeah. It's a pretty simplified view of it. You are skipping a step in the war against your body's war against COVID.
So when they talk about, because I think a lot of people are out there like, well, wait a second, if I get the vaccine, like no one gets the vaccine and thinks to themselves, like a normal vaccine, and thinks, well, I can still get the whole idea is I'm not supposed to be getting the disease, right? With this, it's a little different because now you got these two different shots because they're introducing it in phases, right, to help your body develop it. So it's possible to get it. The idea, though, is that it's not going to affect you like it would, and thus lower the fatality rates, the effects on people, etc. I mean, that's. But then, I mean, I guess in theory, you could spread COVID still, is what they're saying, right?
Well, from what I understand, it should reduce your viral load pretty quickly if you were to encounter the coronavirus. So I'm not entirely sure.
So they're learning more, but theoretically, it should lessen your ability to transmit it. Although you're going to have outliers with everything,
right? But it should lessen your ability to transmit and the amount it has an effect on your body, whether you actually get a true infection or not.
Okay, this is very helpful. If you're listening, I hope you find this as informative as I do. Again, I'm not really into all the biology and the science, so it's nice when someone can bring it down to my level where I can understand it. So, Creighton, we've established what it does. When we come back from the break, I'm going to talk about how it was developed, and then tie in, some of the concerns that folks have regarding side effects and things of that nature. So you've been listening to the Outlaw Radio Show. We'd love to hear from you. Feedback's always appreciated. Our website is outlawradio.org. Man, we have all kinds of things happening here.
Your iPad died?
Wait, is something happening with your iPad
My
too?
iPad died.
Oh, gosh.
I had like 45 seconds was the last time I saw it. So I just kind of spitballed where I was going to land on that.
I think you were pretty close.
I think I was pretty close.
So, are there any advantages to taking this quote-unquote mRNA injection versus a normal vaccine? So, like, as opposed to the flu vaccine being introduced, the pathogen, into your body versus this COVID injection being an mRNA, are there any advantages to where I'm like, okay, well, I would rather now for the flu, we need a flu mRNA injection.
Let's pause. We're going to open the show, and I'm going to have you be on the radio.
Okay.
Because I think that's a great question, so let's do that. So just hold that question, and we're going to go right there. All right, so we ready? This block of audio is 11 minutes. Nick, count me. 3, 2, 1. Welcome back to the Outlaw Radio Show. As always, I'm joined by Creighton Vaughn. Creighton, this is kind of one of those episodes that's right in your wheelhouse. Why?
Because I love biology.
and I don't. And so, and my guess is a lot of our listening audience shares my, probably gravitate more to my end of the biology appreciation spectrum versus yours. And so we're dealing with this vaccine. Everyone's trying to navigate their own personal decisions, trying to understand how this works and the technology behind it, what it is, what it isn't, what it does, what it doesn't. Are there side effects? You know, everything got really complicated this past week when all of a sudden, you know, what was it? The FDA comes out and suspends
The Johnson & Johnson vaccine.
the Johnson & Johnson vaccine because I guess 6 out of how many million people
6.8 million I
had
think?
side effects, which is, and one death I think they've attributed to it, but people are saying that those numbers will probably go much higher, which I've done some research into why that was the case, which I can talk about a little bit later, so remind me. I want to do something a little bit different. So if you're listening on the radio or if you're listening on the podcast, this is pre-recorded, obviously. We live stream the recording of what you're listening to. And between blocks of audio, we have a few additional characters with us that ask questions, bring thoughts. We have a much greater discussion beyond what you're actually listening to. And between blocks, Deal Daddy Derek ended up asking a question that I thought was so relevant because I was having the same thought that we just paused. I said, Derek, let's put you on the radio. And so, Derek, can you kind of lead in here, asking question, Creighton, the question that you were asking just a few minutes ago? So, Derek, you're on.
So the thought that I had was, okay, well, the normal vaccines, quote unquote, that we normally get are a pathogen introduced into the body. So are there any advantages to this new, quote unquote, mRNA injection that we're getting now? Are there any advantages to having that COVID injection versus like a normal flu shot, which is a flu vaccine, like a pathogen introduced into the body? Why would they choose to do that instead of just a normal vaccine? So are there any advantages to having that be an quote unquote mRNA injection or vaccine?
Great question. It's a great question.
Yeah, it really is. And I can only really speculate. I'm not entirely sure if there are published reasons at this point. I can guess that the goal was that maybe quicker, given that you can skip that identification phase. My other option would be you don't have as much risk in introducing a pathogen into someone's body. Given that this is the first one that apparently isn't currently true, because I know that people are having adverse side effects. Some people are having adverse side effects, some of which are bad, like with the Johnson & Johnson. I think the goal would be that you can get these, like, as we move on, because this won't be the last mRNA
Well, you have to
vaccine.
take, like, the normal way that they do a vaccine is that you have to take the actual pathogen, and you've got to figure out a way to engineer that pathogen where you can introduce it to a body without like you're
damaging the body.
without damaging the body. So you got to figure out how can I take this and remove its weapons, so that it can be defeated easily, and then achieve the end result, which I can imagine. I mean, that's why with viruses sometimes you never have a vaccine.
Right. That also
like
happens
AIDS, like the AIDS vaccine. Like there is not a vaccine for AIDS. We don't have a cure for AIDS. It's one of the examples of, there are viruses that you can't create a vaccine or a vaccination for because we can't figure out how to remove its weapons. We can slow it down. There's a lot of different techniques, different things that we can do. So my guess is that developing a vaccine, I mean, they said, like when Trump came out, I think what was it, April, and announced Operation Warp Speed, where they fast tracked, just about everything that they could do to develop and implement and test a vaccine. And people thought Trump was nuts. Like his vaccines typically take 4, 5, 6 years, not just to be developed, but then to go through all the phases of testing to see how they affect various things, such as pregnancy, fertility, which we'll talk about. So it gets fast-tracked. My guess is that being able to go into a body and see how the body was able to conquer the disease, it gives you the blueprint And now we have the technology to then be able to artificially write something that does the same thing. I mean, that's again, Creighton, you tell me if I'm wrong, and just the simplified version of that.
No, that's basically how it works, and I can see how that would be, if not easier, faster to manufacture.
So I guess, Derek, to your question, and let's be honest about it, the benefit is the speed in which this thing was created. And that was the whole purpose behind it. They couldn't follow the normal medical procedures and practices to get to a vaccination. And so they implemented new technology that had been very experimental in its developmental phase. They put a ton of money behind it to push it so that we could try to alleviate this ongoing pandemic. I mean, again, we're kind of facing something we haven't faced in 100 years, have never faced in a modern society like we have. And so the benefit was just, I guess, the speed in which to me, if you're not at risk, and this is an honest question, if you're not at risk for, like if I get the coronavirus, like the odds of me dying from it are astronomically low. And really, for me to even have anything more than a mild to, let's just even say, severe flu experience. I've had a bunch of friends that have gotten coronavirus. Some of them, it was like, man, I felt off for a day, had a little bit of a headache. It went away. And the only reason I know I had coronavirus is that my work mandated I go get tested. So from very little to no effects to, a buddy that was like, man, it was like the worst flu I'd ever had for like a week. And, I drank a lot of Gatorade and I slept it off. And, I've had the flu before and, got over it, was fine. No big deal. The data does show that for a huge segment of our population, if you're not obese, if you don't have comorbidities and you're younger, you'll probably get coronavirus because it's very infectious, but your body is very well equipped to deal with it. That you will be able to develop your B cells will create the antibodies so that the T cells can attack and eat the disease. So you will develop your own immunity. So to me, the question is if I'm going to do this naturally, then why do I even need to take a vaccine? Like, what's the point of a vaccine if my body will do this naturally and I'm not at risk of anything? Like, again, that's, I know if you're elderly, you go take the flu shot because if you get a bad flu, it can kill you. But if you're younger, I mean, yeah, people do die from the flu, but it's so small that what's the point of getting it? Am I making sense with that?
Absolutely. I mean, it's a simple risk versus reward calculation, and you kind of have to decide both your risk and your reward, because I can't do that for you. I can do that for me, and I've done that for me. I have not gotten the vaccine. I might if my work requires it, but I'm not going out on my own.
So I did some research into this Johnson & Johnson, and what really got me interested and intrigued by this was that Tucker Carlson did an interview with one of the head medical professors at Harvard who was sounding the alarm on this Johnson & Johnson vaccine. And basically, the complication, and again, we've had such a minuscule number of people who have actually had side effects. I mean, by and large, the efficacy, the success rate, like if you go get the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, I mean, you're going to be fine. You have a better chance of dying in a car accident than having some type of adverse effect. Getting to the CVS and getting home is more dangerous than the vaccine, and that should be stated. But, Creighton, and you'll find this interesting, is that what they found is that it creates an adverse effect if you already have the antibodies, which makes sense. So if you've already had COVID and you already have developed a natural immunity and you have these antibodies, and then you go and you get this vaccine, like your DNA and the way your coding has been scripted might be different than what this mRNA is being introduced. And so that's what's caused clotting. It's caused some blood issues. But they seem to be tracing it back to people who've already had COVID, already have antibodies. And so the doctor was like, I don't understand why they're not requiring an antibody test before the vaccine. Again, if you haven't had COVID, get the vaccine, you don't have a problem. But if you already have the antibodies, at that point, there's not even a purpose in getting the vaccine, which is interesting. So have you heard anything about that? It's about 30 seconds.
Yes, I have heard some of the clotting issues with Johnson & Johnson and the way that multimedia has taken effect on those conversations about the clotting issues.
Which, again, we live in an age where trying to separate fact from fiction is very difficult. So what we're trying to accomplish in today's show is to just have just a non-biased conversation on a very complex topic. So don't go anywhere. We'll wrap it up. Good job, D.
Yeah, you did a great job. I'm pretty sure that we just went down.
Oh gosh.
That we completely went down?
Yes. I don't know why.
My thing to what I'm thinking about is like we introduce with the flu vaccine, you introduce a pathogen into the body and the body does its own thing. It's like releasing a beast into your body, and that's the system. Like the system takes care of it. But now you're just sending the beast to the king, and the king gives out a transcript that the system has to now read and figure out how it's going to deal with.
Well,
You know, it's kind of that's my low level like description of like what's happening. It's like it's completely different. It's really weird. The system doesn't know like, yo, this is weird. Like the king doesn't usually send us messages on how to deal with the beast. We usually just kill it ourselves. Like this is kind of weird.
What's actually really fascinating about the way they did it is that it's not the actual cell, the B cell, doesn't have any idea anything is weird.
Yeah, so it
Because
just,
it just
attacks.
always gets things.
This
the
is
exact
good.
same
Let's just
way.
jump in with this. This is good stuff. Derek, I'm going to come back right back to you.
Okay.
Do the same
with
thing.
the beast analogy.
Oh, yeah, with the beast.
Okay.
because I actually have an interesting thought to it.
Yeah,
so.
I had a lot more to
Yeah,
say
I
about
have
that
no
too.
idea
So I
what's happening
won't.
with the live stream at this
We'll
point.
just let it be, and we're just
Yeah.
doing our thing. So, let's 9:45 count us down, Nick. Welcome back to the Outlaw Radio Show. We're talking about this vaccine, this COVID vaccine. Creighton, you love biology, and you've been very helpful in kind of setting the stage with some things.
Well, thank you.
And I want to make sure that we get to the development of this, and specifically, you did some research into fertility and et cetera. So I want to get to that. So make sure we do, because that's kind of very important for today's show. But as he did in the previous block, Deal Daddy Derek, aka Darius.
I kind of like biology too.
He kind of likes biology too, and asked another really insightful question. So Derek, kind of jump back in with the thought that you had, and we're gonna roll off of it. We'll riff
to
off
my
of it.
own dumbed down understanding, this is kind of just how I pictured it in my head. But like a normal, say, flu vaccine, where the beast is introduced into the body, the system knows how to deal with the beast. Like it just kills it off automatically with the T cells and the B cells and whatever, and the antibodies, and it kills it. But this one, it just kind of seems like it's going straight to the DNA, the king, and the king sends out a transcript to everybody else on how to kill it, and they're like, what? I don't know. What is this? Like how to kill the beast. And so it just introduces it extremely different. And so that's why I'm like, I just think this is a whole new thing, like in the research that it would have to take to come up with an mRNA quote unquote vaccine as opposed to a normal vaccine. It seems a lot different. Like, why would they not handle it the same way?
So, I think that the confusion there is that it's actually working in the same mechanisms as a regular vaccine. So it's still the B cells, T cells, and antibodies. The only thing that it's cutting out is that identification of the B cells, seeing what they need to make the antibodies for. It's still the same kind of information coming into the B cell that's still telling the B cell what to make to create the antibodies to get the T cells to attack. Why they decided to do this is, like we talked about before, I think it's just speed and maybe possibly the lowering of risk in future viruses.
Well, let me
whatnot.
interject, and this was the thought that I had and why I wanted you to lead us with this, Derek, because, I mean, and Creighton, you tell me if I'm wrong, but what this really is so, we have DNA, and it's natural. I would say it's the scripting of God, that we are his workmanship, his poema, we are his poem, that God has written everything about us and put that in a written form, our DNA. We, as we've advanced, have been able to read that. Like we are reaching the point that we can read the lines of code and see how everything plays with other things. But the entire way that we function naturally is the process of code instilled into us by the finger of God. What makes this so interesting, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, is maybe for the first time, our body is now operating under a new command foreign to our body. Like we now have the language of man being introduced into our body, telling our body to now do something that we would have naturally done otherwise, but we're just kind of circumventing the natural process. Like, which then makes this really exciting from a scientific standpoint, because if we can write code like that and figure out how to interject it into people's bodies, yes, it deals with COVID-19, but it could
The sky's the limit.
The sky's the limit, and that's what makes this, like CRISPR and some of that technology, so groundbreaking.
Yeah, this is the kind of technology that I would describe as both super cool and absolutely horrifying.
Okay, explain why it would be horrifying.
Because you could do some weird stuff. You could get your body to make, you could get somebody else's body to make any protein that you wanted to, if you could get the mRNA string to get its cells to make that.
Could you grow taller? Could we make you get taller?
Not with the mRNA stuff.
Okay.
But with CRISPR, that is the goal, is to be able to change the physical body of things using DNA.
CRISPR
is similar,
which is an
but
entirely
distinct.
different conversation, kind of foreign to what we're talking about in the moment. Now, before we get out of here, please explain kind of, again, I wanted to know how this worked. How was it made? From the best of your research, do people should they have serious concerns about fertility? And again, we leave those decisions to their doctor, their own conscience. But share some of your thoughts, because it's an encouragement to me. It's helpful to me. So,
yeah. So specifically with this, I want to say, not a doctor, college dropout, but I like biology.
Disclosure.
Yes, disclosures. I don't think you need to be worried about fertility. Once again, the way the vaccine works is you get a packet of information into your cells. That information is then used, and then that information is broken down and used elsewhere in separate parts. There is some worry that something called, what is it called? It's DNA retrotranscription could possibly happen, which is where a strand of RNA is passed back into the nucleus, transcribed back into DNA, and appended onto your DNA.
And that's where people get really concerned.
Right, because then it would be like an actual part of that cell's DNA. I don't think that it is that much of a worry for a couple of reasons. The first is that the chances of it happening are low. It's not something that happens very often.
Like, when you say low, are we talking about like the fatality rate low of COVID? Like basically 1%? Are we talking about like low as in like the fatality rate of those 0 to 19, which is like 0.0003%? Like low as in like the chances of life spontaneously happen? Like when you say the chances are low,
it's somewhere between the chances of a fully formed cell falling into shape in the primordial soup.
Okay.
And the fatality rate of children under COVID-19.
Okay,
Somewhere
so
in that range.
So this
I
is
don't know where.
So this is rare, very rare.
Rare.
Okay.
The other reason is that the rule of thumb with mutations, because if you're not aware, you get mutations in your cells all the time.
That's what cancer is.
Yes, but like you get them all the time. Like if you have a 1 in a million chance of having a mutation in any cell that's dividing, that means that you're going to have millions of mutations in your body at any one time.
Because you're constantly changing. What do they say that like
Every
the
7 years,
the
it's a
material
completely
you
different body.
yeah, the material you changes every 7 years, like,
Exactly.
which is why the Bible says you're not flesh and blood.
right.
The
So the rule of thumb with that is that mutations are not passed through gametes, which the difference between you have somatic cells, which are all of the cells in your body, and you have gametes, which are specifically eggs and sperm. Mutations in body cells are not passed on to gametes. So like if you spend a lot of time in the sun and you get a mutation that causes cancer in your arm, that doesn't affect the DNA in your reproductive cells.
Gotcha.
This should be the same way that this would work if it did get retranscribed onto your DNA.
So would you say that while there might be a low risk, I mean, there's more research still kind of needs to be done to be definitive?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a brand new technology.
It's a brand new technology, and I think that's what has some people just like, pumping the brakes a little bit, saying, let's just give it a little time. Like, why do we need to hurry? So, Creighton, thank you so much. Anything else you want to say?
No, I am good. If you're in a high risk thing, get the vaccine.
I would agree.
Go
with
back
that.
to normal life.
Go back to normal life. I would say if you don't get the vaccine, go back to normal life. But that's just
True.
That's just me. Thanks for being with me.
Hey, always a pleasure.
You've been listening to the Outlaw Radio Show. If you liked what you heard, I encourage you to contact your local Christian radio station and thank them that they're carrying this type of programming in your community. If you're listening on radio, check out our podcast, available on Apple, Google, Spotify. You can also watch the live stream recording of the Outlaw Radio Show, outlawradio.live. Subscribe, please, to our YouTube channel. All of our contact information you can find at outlawradio.org, from our email address to links to our Facebook page, to Twitter. Again, on our YouTube page as well as our Facebook page, you can actually watch video from all of the shows. Once again, thank you so much for being with us. My name is Zach Adams, and I do hope that you join me this time next week for more of the Outlaw Radio Show. There we go. Nick, you got
What's up?
anything? You got anything?
Not really. It's all over my head by a bunch.
Nah, this stuff really interests me. As
It's
far as
very
like the
interesting, but it's
vaccines
just
and-
very hard to understand.
Yeah, it's just so weird, like the way that they're doing everything. And okay, so if DNA is God's written code for our existence, like my personal existence, like God created me in his image to be me and to do what I do and my gifts and my skills. And I'm like, yo, you know what? This little splicer thing, it sounds kind of good. Like, I want to be taller. And I go and do that, and they are able to isolate and pinpoint the specific gene that's made me 5'10", and they can pull that out and replace it with one that's going to let me grow over time, and all of a sudden I'm 6'3". Is that playing with God's code and his original intention for me?
So
And I'm like, or no, I'm able to think
thought that
past
too.
what I'm
So
able to
that's,
think past.
that's great,
or,
but
you
let
know?
me play that. No, that I completely agree, but let me play devil's advocate, because it's the same technology that will be used to pinpoint
diseases.
and
cancer.
that it's this bit of your DNA
yeah,
that's going to cause you to have pancreatic cancer and die.
Yeah.
A brutal, terrible death.
and they get rid
And
of
that
it.
was in your code.
Hey,
Now, guess
yo.
what? Your code, while God wrote it, was corrupted by sin.
Yeah.
So there are problems in our code, and because we'll die. So the code's been corrupted by
Already.
sin.
But how do we know that wasn't God's time for me to be go in 50 years by
well,
pancreatic
I would
cancer?
say can man affect the will of God?
No.
No. So I mean, we can go
Yeah.
in and use like CRISPR
Sure.
technology where we remove that DNA, put it all back together, so it's that line of code's going to
CRISPR,
skip.
not splicer. Sorry.
I was actually having a conversation at a Bible study that I used to go to, and we were talking about something in the similar vein with, I don't remember why, but the ability to alter memories.
Oh yeah.
And the guy who was leading the Bible study, the way that he, his ultimate idea was that it would be about the same, it would be the same type of thing as plastic surgery. It's the idea between the person who makes themselves look like Barbie and the person who gets their face reconstructed after a terrible fire. Like plastic surgery is a completely amoral thing.
It's what it's used
how
for, the
it's
intent.
used
Yeah,
that
that's true.
having pancreatic cancer cut out is one thing. Making me look like, I don't know, LeBron James
Yeah.
is a whole nother
So
thing.
it would be like the intent behind it. If it's quote unquote for the better good of yourself or for humanity, then it'd be acceptable. But if it's just for like, you know what, I just want to be taller. Like, yeah, take some genes out. Let me get some taller genes and I'll grow in a few years. Then
There's websites for taller jeans.
for what? Taller genes?
It's called
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Thank you, Nick. You,
But no, that does make a whole lot of sense.
well, this is going to
I
end up
don't
being
know,
a lot
bro.
of video editing for Creighton, so
Yes,
we should
it
probably.
is.
Yeah.
We had like
Hits-
15 minutes of filming
probably
before
hit-
it even started.
Well, he
just
just cut all that out.
Hit a little bit of
Yeah.
music and say goodbye.
us
You guys
out.
hit them out. Send them out. Back to me. Thanks for watching.